Hey, what is going on, leaders, entrepreneurs, and influencers? Super excited to share this next episode with you all about how are you coping. I've got 8 super duper practical steps to cope healthier and more productively. So this is going to be a huge emotional intelligence tip, a big EQ tip here. Now, you may be watching on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, live on Facebook, or even listening to the podcast EQ for Entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope this adds value to you. In fact, I know it is, because this is what's been game changer for me. One of the many aspects of my EQ growth here. Disclaimer: as we've said many times over the throughout our podcast, we are not therapists. We are not counselors. We are not psychologists or psychotherapists. We are just sharing some of our insights and tips and tools that have benefited us tremendously in our own personal EQ and emotional growth journey. Today's episode, again, is about coping. And what a better year to talk about this than this year, when coping is a tremendous asset or liability for everybody this year. Let me tell you how I have coped most of my life. And I'm going to be reading off some notes here. So if you see me looking away, that's what I'm looking at here, looking at some of my notes here to make sure that I hit all the points. So I have done a few things of how I've coped in the past, in the recent past too, for most of my life. Stuff, avoid, and stew. Stuff, avoid, and stew. That has been honestly my primary 3 emotional coping mechanisms for most of my life. When I stew, I withdraw emotionally. When I stew, I withdraw emotionally. My emotional bandwidth is completely chewed up by all my stewing, because I'm all up in my feels, making me completely emotionally unavailable for my wife, my daughter, my friends, my colleagues. So, what are the emotional consequences to others, which is social awareness, when we're not emotionally available, when we're not emotionally present? What is the impact on other people when we are not emotionally available or present? Not only can they think that something is wrong with them when it actually has nothing to do with them, but it completely changes the atmosphere, the vibe, when I have been around others and am not emotionally available. I've single-handedly changed the environment and the atmosphere of business meetings, family gatherings, presentations, because I haven't been emotionally present or available. I've been physically there, but not emotionally there. When was the last time you were present at something and someone was all up in their feels at that particular event, and that impacted the vibe of the environment? I'm going to go out on a limb and say we've all experienced that dynamic before. The opposite is true too, though. When we're completely emotionally available and present, we can also change the vibe and atmosphere in a positive way. It's not about us anymore. Normally, when I'm in my feels, who am I thinking about? Me, this guy right here. Nobody else. I'm not thinking about you. I'm not thinking about anybody else. I'm thinking about myself when I'm just stewing. So when we're emotionally present, we've learned to cope and deal in a healthy, productive way, so we can be available and present for those around us. I'll give you my personal 8-step system for coping at the end of this episode. So how are you coping? How do you cope? Do you have a system or process for coping? If not, I highly recommend an intentional process and system for coping. When you get triggered and slammed with some intense emotions, what do? What happens? Do you handle it productively or unproductively? Is your response healthy or is it unhealthy? Do you fight, flight, or freeze? Do you stew like I have done, or stuff and avoid like I have done for most of my life? Do you withdraw and shut down for hours, days, and weeks? How do I know that? Woo woo, because I have done that. Uh, and when you do withdraw, it makes you completely emotionally unavailable for your loved ones, for your family, for your coworkers. Do you ever eat without thinking? That's another way I used to cope. Overeat and not even think about it. I'd down a bag of chips or cookies, wouldn't even notice or realize that I finished the bag. Do you yell? Are you even aware when you get triggered or emotionally hijacked? Do you go for a walk? Do you lift weights? For me, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Do you journal? So here's some action steps for you. Now, this isn't going to be my 8-step system yet, but just some action steps. Make a list for how you currently handle triggers or anxiety or strong emotions. Make a list. So how do you handle? What are the actual ways? Not how you want to handle it. How do you actually handle it? How do you handle it? Or even another way to look at it, if your spouse or a friend or family member if I were to ask your friend or family member, how do you handle stuff, emotions, strong emotions, what list would they come up with? Would your list and their list be similar? Hopefully they'd be similar because you want an accurate list of how you currently do it. Then next to each one of those ways that you are currently coping, write a plus sign or a minus sign next to each one of those ways that you currently cope. The plus sign meaning it's a positive, healthy, or productive response. The minus sign meaning it's a negative, unhealthy, or unproductive response. Okay, if they're negative, if some of those with the minuses are negative, figure out what are some new, healthy, productive coping mechanisms or tools that you can come up with to replace some of those unhealthy tools that you're currently doing or coping systems that you're currently doing. Now, we are going to share a number of our EQ emotional growth tools at our EQ course that we are launching next month. We're going to be teaching folks how to grow their emotional intelligence, how to develop tools, equipping you to grow your EQ and get emotionally healthy. You can check out more of those details at eqforentrepreneurs.com/EQA. Okay, my own new, healthier, productive personal system of coping is, and I'm going to share that now, my 8 steps, and this is going to be awesome stuff, guys. This is now, so it's awesome when I do it. So here's my transparency. I'm still working on making this, my 8 steps, a habit for myself. I'm probably about 25 to 30% of the time I am doing this, my thing I'm about to tell you. And the other 70% of the time, I'm still going to stew mode, to my default of stewing. But the fact that I went from 0% to never doing this to now 25 to 30% after a few years of being intentional is a huge growth step for me. Okay, so as soon as I get run over by my feels truck, right, by the truck of emotions that just run me over, and I get triggered, and I'm getting emotionally hijacked. And so step number one of the 8 steps, number one is you've got to notice as soon as possible that you're getting run over by the feels truck. You got to, you just identifying it is the first step. Number 2, as soon as possible, begin writing down on your laptop, your phone, your journal, every single one of the emotions that you're feeling. Now, this is important. Don't judge or evaluate your emotions or what you're feeling. Just vomit as many of those emotions down as possible on paper. If you don't do this, if you don't start to write down and journal, what can end up happening is you can start doing what I do, go to my default and just stew. I really want to get my feelings and emotions down on paper or digits as fast as possible. This tremendously helps the brain begin processing each of those emotions just by the simple act of writing them down. And I talk more about that. There's some more physiology that's going on here, but it's very helpful for the brain to be able to start doing this. If you have unidentified flying emotions, UFEs, what? UFEs, you heard it here first. UFEs, baby. If you have unidentified flying emotions in your brain or body, they're just flying around, bouncing around your brain, your body, they have the potential to do some real damage in the short term and long term. Seriously, ask me how I know. So write them down as fast as possible. Number 3, go back to the top of that list. Get a watch or a timer. Give yourself 60 to 90 seconds to feel each one of those emotions, starting at the top. Whatever that emotion is, frustration, sadness, um, nervousness, disappointment, stress, anxiety, worry, concern, whatever that is, let yourself feel each one. Give yourself the space and patience and permission to feel each of those emotions on your list. When you do, each of those emotions will lose its strength and intensity, and you will slowly feel the strength of that emotion begin to dissipate. Now, here's a quick note. You may have to do this particular exercise multiple times over multiple days or weeks or months, depending on the intensity of the emotions. Also, another note, don't beat yourself up for any of the emotions and feelings that you're feeling or that you write down on the list. Emotions aren't bad or good, they just are. It's just information. It's one of the purest forms of information for ourselves. So don't judge yourself or beat yourself up for feeling whatever that emotion is. Number 4, see if you can understand how and why you're feeling each one of those emotions. Is there an emotion that's either unaccounted for, you haven't identified, there's still one floating around in there that you haven't written down yet, or a stranger, meaning you don't know how or why it made the list along with the other emotions? So you want to figure out, if you can, how and why you're feeling each one of those emotions. Number 5, for those of you with faith, for me, I'm a Christian, I want to ask God, I want to pray and ask God, God, give me insight into each of these emotions that I'm feeling. He's the one who gave us feelings and emotions to begin with. So ask him, what is each one of these all about? Get his input, his insight into where each of these emotions is coming from. Number 6, make a list of 10 things you're thankful for. Like, what? How is this helping me out? Make a list of 10 things you're thankful for. Being grateful and thankful changes the state of our heart and can really help put things in perspective. In fact, I just did an episode on this, on the power, one of the most powerful EQ tips I've ever done in 2020, or ever for that matter. That I share that tip of being grateful and some practical points in there as well in one of my previous episodes in the podcast, EQ for Entrepreneurs. Number 7, do a quick assessment on your atmosphere and environment. Is it adding to the anxiety of feeling all your emotions and feelings, or is it lowering the anxiety? Can you change the lighting that you're currently sitting in? Your seating, maybe the chair's making you feel uncomfortable. Can you change your clothes to be more comfortable? Put on some comforting tunes that you like listening to. Put on a fragrant candle, or the what do they call incense or whatever, the smelly stuff. Make your favorite tea or hot chocolate or taco. What? Right? Make your favorite tea, make your favorite beverage. Start a fire, wood fire, maybe in your fireplace. Start a fire. Go get in a fire pit out back and start a fire in the back, in the back. Sit outside. So the question for the environment, number 7, how can you create more comfort in your environment in each of your 5 senses? How can you create more comfort in your environment in each of the 5 senses? Number 8, last one, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu almost every single day. So the point there is, number 8, do something physical. Do something physical. 10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups, 10 jumping jacks. Go for a walk for 10 minutes. Just do something physical that gets you moving. What my personal coping system has done for me is it puts me back in some semblance of control over what I was initially feeling out of control in with my feelings and emotions. Getting back the reins of some of those intense emotions is also very cathartic, and also feeling out of control is typically very anxiety producing. So gaining back some control over your emotions and feelings can be very healthy, helpful, and healing. So I really encourage you to develop a healthy and productive emotional coping mechanisms. And again, this year, man, there's no better time than now to learn a new coping system for yourself, some productive and healthy ones. Maybe mine will work for you. Maybe you can learn some, take some of those that I share with you. Maybe it'll help out. If not, either way, create your own healthy systems. And at a minimum, do that coping mechanism or coping system inventory right now. Do that. How are you doing? How many of them are positive? How many of them are not, healthy? Right? And trust me, this will be a tremendous asset in your emotional growth journey. And as always, remember this: emotionally healthy people help heal other people emotionally. If this added value to you, please share it. Please tag a friend. Let folks know about this episode if you feel like it add value to them as well. God bless you.